The Human Optimization Podcast is proudly brought to you by Vicon Supplements, where quality meets sustainability. Vicon's all-natural supplements are handcrafted and sustainably produced in Canada, bringing you products that nourish both your well-being and our planet. Visit viconsupplements.com today and be a part of a greener, healthier future.
Are you ready to embark on a journey to the best version of you? Join me, Lisa Pitel-Killah, as I dive deep into the world of hair tissue mineral analysis and functional medicine with fellow experts, and guide you on the path of unlocking your full potential. As a multi-time kettlebell sport world champion, I'm on a mission to reach high-performance professionals from around the world to help you minimize tiring symptoms, maximize health, and gain unstoppable energy. This is the Human Optimization Podcast.
Hello there, Lisa. I'm so excited to be chatting with you today. You and I have been sort of chatting and doing business for a while now, like a couple of years, few years.
Yeah, I was going to say probably longer than that.
Yeah. And you are a wealth of information when it comes to this kind of like tricky, different kind of tests, the HTMA test and minerals. So we're going to jump all into minerals and HTMA. Do you want to maybe first just tell the audience a little bit about your background, how you got into all of this? I can see your lovely medals in the back there. Yeah.
Oh, goodness. So I mean, I dove into kind of headfirst into studying functional medicine years ago, kind of in 2009, 10, probably 2011 area, just because my own health, I was in burnout. I was an entrepreneur. And so that's when I really kind of changed the path of my career, right? And said, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to help people. And, obviously spent years helping myself first. And then started studying and then just kept studying. I feel like I'm a forever student and researcher.
Yeah.
Right? It's an ever-changing, amazing industry. So, and I mean, along the way, I discovered HTMA, right? And so that was a diagnostic test that I am happy I found it at the time that I did.
Mm-hmm.
Everything happens for a purpose, for a reason at every point in time. And I'm happy I found it when I did, but it definitely made me realize that I wished I had found it sooner.
You're right.
Because it really takes care of the foundation and fixes so many of those holes and gaps and symptoms that we're dealing with, where we maybe think we're fixing them, but maybe it's not enough. And so I really had thought, I wish I would have discovered this first or earlier, because I may not have gone through as much as I did. But obviously there were reasons for that too.
Absolutely.
And I mean, along the way, I went to the world championships, swung some kettlebells and I lived to tell about it.
Amazing. That's awesome. You're incredible. So many talents. This HTMA test, I know what you mean. I mean, nutrients are everything, right? That's what I try to sort of educate my ladies on, is when you look at those biochemical pathways in the body, what makes them tick over? It's the nutrients that go into them. So that's why the HTMA, and obviously with the HTMA, we'll get into it, but we can tell so much more than just minerals, right? So let's have you answer a couple of questions. So what is the HTMA? How does it work? Why is it valid? That's a bit of a, I don't know if we want to say loaded question, but I think we need to touch on why it is valid, because I think sometimes people think, really, hair? But there are reasons for it. And maybe, just touch on sort of the basic principles around the testing, what it is and why it's valid. Maybe we can start there.
Yeah. So, I mean, hair has been used for decades and decades to identify mineral sufficiency, as well as toxicity of metals and heavy metals, things like that. And actually, in all reality, it's one of the best ways to measure heavy metals in the body.
Yeah, right.
It tells us a big story. And it can be correlated with urine and stool and things like that too, depending on what you're trying to look for. But it's non-invasive. That's one nice thing, right? We don't need to go get blood drawn or anything like that. It's easy to be able to execute on your own, right? So if you have a hairdresser or a friend who can take a little snippet of hair, it's super easy.
Don't get your husband to do it. Don't get your husband to do it. Speaking from
Right?
experience, I lost a lot of hair that way.
I do my own. I'm like, oh,
I
that
do
looks
my own
good. Okay.
too. Yeah, I do my own now. Yeah.
That's funny. Oh goodness. But I mean, minerals, what they figured out, majority of the research they figured out in the 70s was minerals don't deposit randomly in the hair. They deposit in very distinct patterns that change based on time, environment, sleep, exercise, nutrition, micronutrients, right? All these things change those patterns, but they're deliberate. And so it really does give us a huge amount of information about the individual. And, when we talk about validity, I think one of the biggest hurdles that we have as practitioners using HTMA testing is when you think about something like blood, right? You can go get a blood draw anywhere in the world, and the reference ranges may be just slightly different, or maybe the unit of measure is a bit different, but the way that it's done is universal. So the results can be interpreted anywhere in the world and they're exactly the same. Okay. Now, hair, unfortunately, from my research and analysis, not every lab has the same standard protocols from when they receive the hair sample to when it actually gets tested. And I think this is part of that variation that we see, and probably one of the reasons why some people go, well, it's not valid because you send it to this lab and it says one thing, you send to that lab, it says something else. So I will tell you the labs that we use, obviously, we're talking about Trace Elements, which is one of the main labs, Dr. Watts, and the ARL, Analytical Research Labs. 2 labs been around since the 70s, almost 50 years. And they both use the same process, right? Not all the other ones do. And that's why it's so important to make sure that you're using a lab that has that qualification and that standard protocol and that they follow it.
Yeah, because some of the labs will wash the hair, right? Or they'll treat it in some kind of way. Yeah.
Right. And that affects a lot of times that chemical processing of the hair affects sodium. We know how important that is. Potassium, we know how important that is. Can also affect zinc, copper, right? There's other manganese, there's other minerals that can be affected by adding that. I even did a test once because I had a vet that I was studying under when I started doing animal testing.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, you can actually, because I said, what about horses? Because they don't get bathed all the time. They're rolling in the dirt and everything else, right? So I said, well, what do I do with the horse hair if it's dirty, right?
Yeah, right.
And so she said, oh, just clean it with alcohol. So I'm like, So I did a little experiment. So myself and my assistant, we took a hair sample from each other.
Yeah.
And we took a double sample. And from that double sample, we put one of the samples in an envelope and was ready to ship. And then the other sample, we cleaned both of them with alcohol, rubbing alcohol. And then we let it dry and we put it in another envelope and we identified them and we called the lab. We said, make sure that these are separate, that they, that this one gets a new number and et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
The levels changed.
I'm sure.
So I don't, right? So when I get told things, I try it and I'm like, nope. They were not the same. They were all skewed a little bit different. So I don't use that either. So it's important just to the hair sample just needs to be clean, dry, don't use conditioner, don't put anything in your hair, use a regular, shampoo, not, a dandruff shampoo or whatever, use a nice clarifying shampoo and that's it.
Yeah.
It's easy.
Yep. Simple, easy. And the other thing is also well water. So well water can really affect the sample, can't it? Like, no.
Right. And you know what the amazing thing is that people don't believe that's true.
Really?
I have so many tests that I've done. I test myself about once every month to 6 weeks.
Yeah, right.
And so usually I'm testing something, like I'm taking high dose this or something else or whatever. So I'm always curious about what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, I did a test years ago when I heard that too, because I am on well water and I do have a softener.
Yeah, right.
So we use sodium chloride pellets for our softener. And my sodium's always good. So I thought, oh my gosh, is it my softener? Is it me? Am I absorbing it? Right? Because then my question is, well, yeah, we have hair contamination with a softener, but I'm also absorbing some of that sodium through my skin.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
Right? You gotta think about that. Well, I'll tell you, I did a swap And so I'll tell you why most people don't use potassium chloride, because the pellets are like 5 times more expensive.
Right.
It cost me a huge amount of money to do the switch, but I'm like, I'm just going to do it because I need to test this.
Yeah.
So I switched us. I let our sodium chloride run down, and I switched us to potassium chloride. And then about a month or 6 weeks later, I tested after showering at home, and my sodium dropped and my potassium skyrocketed.
So,
Yeah.
well, that's fascinating. And so my question is, do you wash your hair in distilled water? Because some of it's on the hair shaft, right? But some of it's also absorbed. So
Yeah.
what I tell my clients, and I'd love to hear from you if this is a best practice or not, is if you're on well water, rinse your hair in distilled water to get anything on the hair shaft off. Right?
Yep.
Because I have absolutely seen well water more than a few times now. So that absolutely well water correlates with some crazy highs, right? I've had people do their test not realizing that they were in hard water or for whatever reason, and it comes back. And now I almost always know if we've got tons of highs, I'm like, you're in well water, right? And you didn't wash your hair in distilled water, right? And they're like, yeah. And then when we go back and do a second sample, if they do it in distilled water, it's completely different. So
I think it is valid for sure.
Yeah, distilled
And
water.
I think rinsing the hair, and I think that it's more effective if you like use distilled water to wet the hair, shampoo and rinse, let it dry naturally, then take your dry hair sample.
Sure.
I think it's a bit different doing it that way than if you were to, shower, do all the things in the well water, and then take the hair sample and then rinse it with distilled water.
Yeah, sure. That makes sense.
Well, and you have to take into account too that the protocol that the lab follows, the standard protocol, is that when they receive the hair, they rinse it in reverse osmosis water and then they let it dry. It's tested.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So there is a rinse before. There's no chemical treatment, but there's a rinse. Yes.
Okay, interesting. Well, I have absolutely seen when the people don't do the distilled, it skews the results. So for people listening who don't understand the HTMA, and it is a very tricky, complex, nuanced test. There's what we're trying to look at, correct me if I'm wrong, is the cellular. Trying to look at what's happening at the cellular level there, not what's on the outside of the hair. So it's like, and maybe this is where you can try to simplify how it works, because I believe it's like 3 months worth of your mineral status at a cellular level. Is that? Maybe I'll let you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, basically what happens is we have fluids circulating in the body all the time, right? We've got lymph, we've got different fluids. And so those fluids carry minerals.
Yeah.
Right. And so those, as they circulate and as our hair grows, right, whether it's scalp hair, armpit hair, whatever, as that hair grows, it has those minerals how do I say this properly?
Deposited?
It's exposed. The hair is growing, so it's exposed to that internal environment.
Liquids.
And as it grows out, it hardens.
Yeah.
As the hair grows out, it hardens, right? And then it's in the hair. So yeah, we really want to see what's in the hair. And you are 100% right. And this should be, kind of top of mind for people who are on well water that aren't filtering. Because you are right. When you said that, I know when I see somebody on well water because all their levels are high, and that's right. And that's not necessarily a good thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Not at all.
When you see those high levels and then those really high levels of like, sometimes it's manganese, and then we've got calcium, and we've got all these hugely high levels. And now we've got like minerals that are on an effect, almost like it's like dropping off a cliff, because now they're kind of coming into a toxic level, right? And causing other stuff to kind of go awry in the body. So that's not a great place to be either. No. So, filtering water, not only thinking about filtering the water that you're drinking, but the water that you're showering in is important.
Bathing in, 100%. Awesome. Okay, I've got so many thoughts. Hopefully we can touch on sodium a little. I think because people sometimes see their sodium as elevated and they think it's dietary, but maybe we can touch on I don't know why, I just feel like I want to talk about sodium on the HTMA. So, and then let's talk about that first, and we'll talk a little bit about the difference between the HTMA and maybe blood.
Sure. Yeah. So, sodium's important. It has a direct relationship with the adrenals, and it supports the adrenals to kick up and kind of initiate that stress response when we need it. And so if we don't have enough sodium, we feel like a balloon with no air, a little deflated, right? And when you feel that sodium, and so if you've ever done an HTMA and you have had a low sodium, you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, I do.
And
I do.
well,
I find most of my clients, like I'm
know.
talking 9 times out of 10, it's either really low sodium or it's
Yeah.
super high, which we'll touch on why it
Yeah.
might be.
Yep. And so that low level, though, equates to that, again, that kind of deflated feeling. And I remember even when I did that swap with the water, because that's really the only time my sodium's been low. And I remember one day I was driving my Jeep, I'm going down the road, back road, and I kind of took a deep breath and I was like, man, I feel really good today. And I was like, something's different. And I couldn't help but think that. I even remember I was driving over an old railroad track when I thought about that. And I was like, something's different. And then I'm like, I'm going to take my hair sample. Something's changed.
Yeah.
And sure enough, my sodium was back to optimal. When sodium goes from low to high, it's like you have a new, everything is just easier and you feel stronger mentally and physically. And so, and I think people get scared of sodium, like we get scared into like the low sodium. That's going to give you a CVD and a heart attack, right? We think of all these things. It's like, no, that's not exactly true. And we're talking about sea salt, which also has minerals in it, and it's nourishing for the body and the adrenals, etc. Now, one of the things that does drive sodium up is stress. Right. And so when we see these people with the really low sodium, that means they're chronically stressed. And now the sodium has plummeted, right? It just can't stay at that level anymore. So it's gone down. So we really have to, if we have a really high sodium, that's stress and inflammation. But what's happening nowadays, I find, and I think we both see this in patterns, especially over time and, hundreds and thousands of HTMA tests, we're in that more chronic stress stage, right? We're all running around and we've got our phones and we have to do this and that, and the days are shorter and you blink and the day's over. That's all stress. And that's what a lot of people are dealing with, and why, that initial bump in sodium happens. And I feel like it's all, kind of a matter of time before it starts to slowly decline, and everybody's different on how long that actually takes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Sodium, so important. And so many people are scared of it, but we really need oftentimes more sodium and to do all the nervous system, the adrenal work. Okay, so how does the HTMA differ to blood?
Yeah, so I mean, there's always a starting point. This is what I tell people. It's like there's blood and HTMA really do go hand in hand. They kind of complete the circle. Because we have to remember that blood is also identifying for us enzymatic reactions.
Yeah.
And so if there's something in a reaction or a mechanism of the body that has a problem, the HTMA might not pick it up, but the blood will, and vice versa. So let's start here. Sometimes the blood is normal, right? A lot of times the blood is the last to be affected.
Yeah.
But the HTMA may tell us a different story. So if the potassium is okay in blood, what blood likes to do is it likes to be in homeostasis, which means balance. And so if the blood is low in potassium, it'll pull it from somewhere. It'll pull it from the bone. If it's high in calcium, it'll deposit it in soft tissue because it wants to keep the blood in that nice balanced position. So things get buried and pulled from other places. The HTMA shows us that burying and pulling. Right. So then we can identify things that, may look okay in blood, but that's not okay because it's severely deficient. Now we're going to be pulling from our reservoirs, which we really don't want to tap into until we actually need to. And that's later in life. So we really want to make sure that those are kind of topped up all the time. Now, you could have another scenario, and I see this quite often, where, you have someone who has, a blood pressure issue. Maybe we have medications on board, and now we have a different problem. Now we have HTMA telling us something that we know we need, but the mechanism of action has changed, and now the blood labs look different.
This
And
really
that's
gets confusing.
really, again, that's really where that circle completes.
You're right.
Because, you start with HTMA, but you also have to take it to the next level and say, is there anything else I need to consider here? Because, this person has this symptom and this diagnosis and these things going on. Maybe we need to bring in some blood labs and make sure that there's nothing in the blood that I need to be worried about.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Exactly. They can be complementary for sure. Love that.
Mhm.
Okay, so just quickly, why do we even care about minerals anyway?
Oh my gosh. Does everybody have a basement where you are?
A
We all
basement?
have basements.
Not in
No
Australia.
basement.
I miss my Canadian
Okay.
basements. No.
There's got to be a foundation of the house, right? Even if
There is
it's
a
a flat.
foundation. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Minerals are the foundation.
Yeah.
If that foundation isn't strong and it has cracks and holes and rodents, you're not going to have a house that's sitting on solid ground. That's what minerals do for the body. Think about magnesium. You do magnesium research 10 years ago and they're like, oh, it's used in 300, almost 300 enzymatic reactions in the body. Then it was 6. Now it's 8.
Is it 800 now?
They
Wow.
keep discovering more.
Yes.
I keep reading and it keeps increasing. And I'm like, oh my gosh. My mother actually just had surgery 2 weeks ago. And so I'm sitting in there. And so magnesium really is important for heart health. It is the heart healthy mineral, right? And it's one of the first minerals affected by that high sodium, that when we were talking about sodium and stress, right? It's one of the first minerals that gets affected by that. You need more. And, after surgery, they were monitoring her because it was a aortic aneurysm, so affecting blood pressure and heart and things like that. So, and I'm watching the nurse's face as she's monitoring her vitals, and she was a little concerned because things were kind of blipping around. And so she said, I think she needs some magnesium. And I smiled and thought, well, and I said, yeah, most likely. I'm like, I have some here in the closet that we brought with us. I'm like, can I give her that? Or like, do I need to wait for something else? Or like, what am I doing here? Because I'm like, yeah, she probably does. Because A, the stress of the surgery.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
B, the fact that it's heart-based.
Yeah.
And all of that, right?
Yeah.
I feel like everybody, I think people that, go through surgery would benefit from magnesium after surgery just to calm everything down.
Of course, yes. Yeah, and minerals, they're imperative to make, again, all those enzymatic, those biochemical reactions in the body even work. Yeah,
exactly.
Amazing. All right, so what about heavy metals? So what about, why do we test the minerals alongside the heavy metals on the HTMA test?
Yeah, I mean, it's always exposure to heavy. I mean, who's not?
Yes.
I sit here in my office and I'm like, yeah, I'm breathing in toxins from the vent system and everything else, right? So between toxins and heavy metals, I mean, we're exposed every day. The critical thing, though, is a couple things. You have to, interpretation, of course, we talked about it being complex. When you have a person, typical client, let's say with a low sodium, so the adrenals aren't functioning maybe at an optimized level, we could see heavy metals on the test and be like, those shouldn't be there because the adrenals aren't strong. Body's not strong enough to detox those. We've got exposure. Right? Then, you have the other scenario where maybe the body's not strong enough to detox and there's nothing there, but it doesn't mean there's nothing there. Right? We watch the functionality of the body increase and all of a sudden, boom, the metals are coming out. But that's a good thing. We want to get rid of all that.
That's right.
The other interesting fact and why I think you can't just look at heavy metals, because we have to remember the biological replacement of elements theory, which states that the replacement of minerals in order for the body to start to detox metals is the first step. We hear so much about detox and about chelation sometimes. And don't get me wrong, there is a need for that, right? It's like the emergency room at the hospital. Sometimes you got to go there. There is a need for that. So if there is an acute exposure and chelation is necessary, that's why it's there. But in general terms of just normal, everyday, low exposure, that's not, you've got to replace the minerals first, because ultimately the body doesn't want heavy metals. But sometimes if we have a deficiency, we have a heavy metal that's being sequestered in replacement of it because they're chemically similar enough. They're not the same, but they're close enough. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the entire reason for the entire goal of the body is to survive. It'll do it however it has to. So, even going down the road of, I've had clients go down the road of chelation of mercury, but they have a major zinc deficiency and a selenium deficiency. Well, if they don't fix the deficiency, the mercury is just going to keep coming back.
Yes. Yeah. So would it be fair to sort of say, and then sometimes this is how I explain to my clients, is that the body that the heavy metal will try to sit in place of that mineral. Absolutely. And the body will kind of get a little confused and go, well, you look similar enough. I'll try to use you in place of the low zinc, but it can't. That heavy metal doesn't do the job of zinc. In fact, there are no known physiological roles for heavy metals, right? And they can do a lot of damage. Is that sort of a good analogy?
Well, damage, and they advance the aging process.
Yeah, right.
Who wants to get older faster?
No thanks. Oh,
right? No. I had a conversation today with a client, and he was talking about his hair, and I said, he's a little younger than me, and we were talking about gray hair, and I'm like, yeah. I said, I started mineral balancing about 10 years ago, and I just turned 50, and I probably haven't had a gray hair in 6 years.
Wow, that's excellent.
So you think about the average age of someone getting gray hair, and it's not that you're never going to have gray hair. It's just you can slow all that stuff down.
You can, yeah.
And so the interesting part is, if you think about women, when do we start really, like I was thinking about me, I'm like, when did I start really dyeing my hair because I would get the odd like gray or whatever? That's probably in my late 30s, maybe early 40s, something like that. And now I'm in my 50s, and I don't have to do that. I haven't dyed hair in years, right? Yeah. So simple things like that, and you have to consider the fact, and I will tell you, over that period of time, I've dumped every metal known to man, and I grew up in Chemical Valley. Wow. So who knows how long all that stuff had been sitting inside me, causing problems, and all the things that I've kind of breathed in my life and everything else, that I finally was able to get rid of.
Yeah, no, the graying hair thing is so interesting. I remember learning from Ben Lynch about graying hair and glutathione stores, and I think hydrogen peroxide. And I, touch wood, have never seen graying hair yet on my head, but I do dye my hair, and it is blonde, so there might be some in there. I'm not sure. Okay, awesome. So let's chat about, why do we have to stop thinking about minerals in isolation and individually? So one of the big things I'll talk about is everyone's taking magnesium, because we know it is important. So everyone's taking magnesium, but it needs its friends, right? So so maybe we could talk about why single minerals aren't always helpful or a good idea.
Yeah. So, when you look at, anybody who's, kind of listening or watching, if you want to have fun with all this, go to Google and just Google mineral wheel.
Oh gosh, I don't know if that's fun. I don't know that I'd say that's fun. It's overwhelming.
Right? No, I know. So,
but it's awesome.
awesome. Right? You have this wheel of minerals, and I think there's a mineral and vitamin one, and maybe a heavy metal one too. But and they all there are a number of lines attaching that circle, with minerals on other ends of it. And on those lines, there's multiple arrows going both directions. The interrelationships of minerals with one another, not even talking about, vitamins and metals and things like that, are there. The wheel is very intricate, and there are many, many of them. And so, even thinking about magnesium. So yes, a lot of people really do need magnesium, but what if they already have a low calcium? Because magnesium affects calcium, keeps calcium in check. But if calcium's already low, you might be driving it a little lower, right? It's the same with something like zinc. Zinc has a very special relationship with sodium, and it has a lowering effect on sodium. So if you have somebody that already has a low sodium and they start taking large doses of zinc, like some of the protocols we've seen in the past few years, now we're making that problem worse. They have fatigue. You're making it worse, right? And there's always an end result of an effect when you're using single nutrients, especially if they're at high doses. And that's one of the dangers of that, right? Even some of the zinc supplements, you go online and look for a zinc supplement, it's 50 milligrams.
Yes, I know.
Like,
Insane.
nobody should be taking, very few people should be taking 50 milligrams of
Yeah.
zinc, in my opinion.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
agree.
in most cases, I'm using anywhere from 10 to, max 20, 25.
Yep, me
And that's
too.
rare,
Yep.
right? You don't need that. And the other thing I find too is that, sometimes those big mega doses of stuff,
Yeah,
you don't need when you're doing when you're looking after the whole picture,
that's right.
right? You may need some of those in conjunction with each other,
Sure.
right, to change patterns. But once you get there, you don't need those anymore. It's an interesting phenomenon with regards to, again, that interrelationship, because there are so many things to consider when you're looking at the minerals and how they're utilized.
Yeah, they can be antagonistic and they can be synergistic and throw each other out of whack. So this is, the complexity of minerals, the HTMA, but the minerals in and of themselves. And then we won't even get started on vitamin D and the mega doses of vitamin D. Oh my goodness.
And what they do to potassium and magnesium.
Oh no,
Yes.
Scary. Okay, so let's talk about calcification. Osteoporosis, because obviously, my audience is more midlife women. So a lot of women are thinking when it comes to bone health, it's all about calcium, right? I knew somebody who had some hip problems and she thought, right, all I have to do is drink tons of smoothies with cow milk, right? And ended up with irritable bowel disease. Not that I'm saying that's why, but anyway, it's what I'm talking about is that fixation on calcium. And even to this day, I have clients coming in and they're on calcium supplements alone, not with K or anything else. So why don't we talk a bit about bone health, calcification? This also back to D as well, mega doses of D and what that can do to our, calcium levels. So let's chat a bit about that.
Yeah. So, this is such a common phenomenon is calcification. And so when we say calcification, we're talking about calcification in the soft tissue. So that can cause issues like inflammation, right? We can go down the road of arthritis, osteopenia, osteoporosis, right? All these things, because the calcium isn't in the bones and the teeth in the structure where it actually should be. And again, a lot of this can be stemmed from stress, right? There are certain things that cause stress. And then, of course, and I won't go through the whole stress response, but remember the sodium goes up. We talked about that. That increases the stress response, which then depletes magnesium. And when magnesium goes down, calcium can go rogue. And that's when it ends up in the soft tissues. And if that stress continues, that calcification really is a buffer for us to not feel some of the things that we maybe don't want to, right? So there's an emotional part of protection with calcification as well. So sometimes it's a kind of a trauma emotional thing that's attached to that too, not just supplements, but the supplements will do the same thing. I actually had, I'll give you an example. I had a client years ago. She got diagnosed with osteoporosis, and she was doing, the typical calcium supplementation and doing her trampolining and doing all these things. And about a year later, she found me. And the reason she found me was because she was having a bowel movement about once every 4 days. She felt absolutely atrocious. She had SIBO she couldn't get rid of, but then she also had calcification in the joints so bad that she could no longer make a fist with her hand. And so, one of the, we do need calcium, but it's got to get to the right place. So what's happening is we're putting calcium into the body. It's not being deposited in the right place. Now it's being deposited in the wrong places. So we have lots of calcium in our body in all the wrong places. Right? And so many times you'll see that calcification, it needs attention. And that calcification that shows up high in HTMA is also going to tell you that person has a calcium deficiency, but you can't fix it with calcium.
Yes, hence the complexity.
You've got to fix it with magnesium and boron and MK7 or MK4, depending on what K2 you want. You need magnesium, sodium, potassium, all these, right? All these things start to mobilize that start to ionize that calcium, start to let it go back into the place where it needs to go.
Yeah.
And then it starts to fix itself.
Mhm.
So in this particular case for her, you know, we did our protocol took about 8-9 months, and then her calcium was back down to a normal level, and she felt like a different person.
Oh, amazing. Yeah.
So it takes time and effort, but it takes the right nutrients to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And I feel terrible with regards to the fact that, you know, that we don't all know all this information, because it's just so important.
Yes, I know what you mean. Mhm.
And then the vitamin D part, that's a tough one, because oral D is a hormone, right? And when it enters the body, what people what I think needs to be understood, and again, we're only looking at this from a mineral perspective. So there are cases where D is necessary to use, and right, every case is different. But when we're talking about it in general terms, especially if there's calcification in the body, remember that calcification comes back around to magnesium potentially being low, and then calcium rises. And so what happens is vitamin D not only needs magnesium to be made bioavailable, so if the person has a magnesium deficiency that's existing, that's going to make it worse. But it's also going to have a negative effect on potassium. It likes to drive potassium very low. And so again, when potassium goes low, the relationship of sodium to potassium increases, with sodium on top. And as that increases, we burn more magnesium. So in all the scenarios, we burn more magnesium. And then the less magnesium we have, the more calcium is allowed to kind of take off and be in the wrong place.
Yeah.
So it's not like D is not something I use a lot, but what I do use is the cofactors to D. So similar to the complexity and the relationships of minerals, there are cofactors that help the body, that a body that has sufficient cholesterol and a little bit of sunshine to make D.
Yeah.
Right? And that's magnesium, potassium, boron, and P5P, which is a form of vitamin B6. So bring those into the picture. And again, don't do this on your own, but bring those into the picture, which in many cases, they might be included in a mineral balancing protocol that you know you might make. And the body will naturally start to rejuvenate itself and make its own D.
Yes, I love that. Couple of things. Very important, like you said, P5P. There are other nutrients like vitamin A. There are vitamins that also help with the mineral process, right? So for people listening, it's an HTMA, it's a mineral test, but from that test, we can sometimes determine, okay, well, you need some Bs, you need some A, you need some E, right? And then that calcification also can be dangerous too, because when we get that soft tissue calcification, that can be dangerous for our arterial health. Right. So this is and it's a big thing for midlife women. You know, we've got to think about our bone health, but we need to think about our heart health as well. That's what we're sort of talking about. That soft tissue calcification can be uncomfortable, but it could also be deadly if it got too rogue.
And you've got to think, and you're right, you got to think about two things. So think about the effect that magnesium has, right?
Yes.
On that calcification of our
Yes, exactly.
But then even think about when we're talking about something else, and we haven't touched on this, but I'll just kind of pop it in here, is that a lot of, because we are women, and because women, our energy comes mostly from estrogen, right? We want everything to be in balance, but so we're more kind of emotionally attached to copper.
Yes.
And so copper and zinc are kind of polar opposites to a certain extent, right? Where you've got progesterone, testosterone on this side, and then estrogen on this side.
Yeah.
And so because we tend to run a little higher in copper sometimes, right? Not everybody, but a lot, then we have a little bit of a zinc deficiency. Well, zinc is needed to keep arterial walls flexible. So there's again, so many functions that all these minerals are responsible for.
Beautiful point. Good point.
Right. It's not even just about one. There's always little nuances and extras.
Well, we could talk for hours. We could talk for hours, but we can't do that. We've been talking for 45 minutes. Okay, so why don't we wrap it up? And why don't you have a nourishing adrenal recipe, I believe. What is this?
Oh, so, well, there's kind of, I feel like there's a couple things that you
Uh-huh.
can do. So it's simple things that you can do. One
Yeah.
thing I love, and it's not necessarily, well, it is sort of an adrenal thing, but it's liver too.
Yeah.
Remember, our livers work hard every day, all day long, all night. They never get a break, right? So one thing I love to do is I love to be able to support the detox that happens throughout the night when I wake up. So a little bit of warm water or hot. I try and do hot as I can, but still, drink away. But with juice of a half of a lemon,
Yeah.
and then quarter teaspoon of Celtic sea salt. Beautiful
Oh,
way to start the
yeah.
day.
Awesome. Mhm.
Nourish the adrenals with your
Yeah.
sea salt, get some minerals in,
Yeah.
nice warm water, wake up the digestion, and some lemon to kind of stimulate that detox and support the liver with what it's already been doing for however
Beautiful.
long you've been sleeping.
Love it. Love it. You are amazing. You are a wealth of knowledge. I'm always picking your brain, and thank you for that, for allowing me to. So tell everybody where they can find you. I know you also have a Vicon practitioner page. So tell us about Vicon if you'd like.
Yeah. So, I mean, ultimately, my website, lisapitel-killah.com, it's more like a traffic stop. So it has
Yeah.
little avenues that you can kind of find what everything else that we do. But you know what? I mean, if you're looking for HTMA testing, obviously, Tara, you're on there. So there's a practitioner page we have. There's practitioners all over the world, that you can utilize to be able to test your minerals and get some support with mineral balance. Yeah, and again, lots of great information on my page, podcasts, articles, and things like that too. So if there's things that interest you in health and wellness, then you can find them there as well.
Awesome. And we'll put all of that information in the show notes. Thank you so much. It was so fun chatting with you.
Oh my goodness, I love it. And I could talk all day long.
Yes.
I know we don't have time, but
Yeah, we
thank
could.
you
I'll
so
have to have
much.
you back on.
Honored to be a guest. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. Bye.
Thanks for joining us today on the Human Optimization Podcast. Episode technical production is by Grace Sylvester and guest booking by Stu Tate. Want to learn more? Visit lisapitel-killah.com for incredible free resources to supercharge your journey to becoming the best version of you. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like and subscribe to the Human Optimization Podcast and follow me on social media at Lisa Pitel-Killah.